Why medieval marriage was hardly a happily ever after. When we imagine medieval marriages, it's easy to think of gallant knights kneeling before fair maidens, castles echoing with music, and weddings blessed beneath the vaulted ceilings of grand cathedrals. But behind the poetry of troubadours and the painted smiles of illuminated manuscripts lay a reality that few modern hearts could endure. Marriage in the Middle Ages was rarely about love. It was about property, power, bloodlines, and survival. And for many, it was a union filled not with romance but with betrayal, silence, and even violence. This is not a fairy tale. It's a journey into the shadows of true medieval unions, where happiness was often a fleeting illusion. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more shocking and bizarre stories from history. Marriage is a transaction, not a choice. In the medieval world, marriage was an arrangement between families, not between two people in love. Dowries were currency, and daughters were bargaining chips. A wealthy family could exchange a daughter for land, titles, or alliances. One recorded case from 12th century France tells of a noblewoman, Agnes of Poitou, who at the age of 15 was married off to the Holy Roman Emperor Henry III. The match was not made because they loved one another. Indeed, they barely knew each other. It was crafted by advisors who believed such a union would secure political stability. Agnes left her family forever, stepping into a world of strangers and rigid duties. To her, marriage meant the end of choice. To her family, it meant the preservation of power. Child brides and the silence of youth. Today, we shudder at the thought of children being married, but in the Middle Ages, it was common, particularly among nobility. Girls as young as 12 were considered old enough to wed, while boys were typically married a little older, often in their mid-teens. One heartbreaking case comes from England. Eleanor of Brittany, niece of King John, was promised to several suitors before she was even old enough to understand what marriage meant. Though she never married, her story reveals how young girls were tossed around in a cruel game of politics. Many others, less fortunate, were wed as soon as they could bear children. Imagine being 12 years old, sent to live with a man twice or 3 times your age, expected to produce heirs, manage households, and obey a husband you barely knew. Childhood was stolen, and marriage became a prison of expectations. Love forbidden when desire was a sin. Love outside marriage was not only discouraged, it could be deadly. Yet history whispers of forbidden romances that ignited behind castle walls. Take the story of Peter Abelard and Heloise in 12th century Paris. Abelard, a brilliant philosopher, fell in love with his young student Heloise. Their affair led to a secret marriage, but when her uncle discovered it, Abelard was attacked and castrated. Heloise was forced into a convent, and though they exchanged letters for years, their love was never allowed to flourish. This tragedy shows how even genuine affection could not escape the iron grip of medieval marital expectations. Power and betrayal within the marriage bed. Even within marriage, love was rare. Husbands often sought mistresses, and wives were left to endure their solitude. For queens and noble women, being unable to bear a son was a death sentence to their reputation. One of the most infamous examples is Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was first married to Louis VII of France. The union was miserable. Eleanor was accused of being too independent, too outspoken, too powerful for a queen. Their marriage eventually ended in annulment. Eleanor later married Henry II of England, but even that was riddled with betrayal, as Henry kept numerous mistresses. For Eleanor, marriage was not a fairy tale. It was a battlefield of pride, betrayal, and endurance. Domestic life, duty, and desperation. For ordinary people, marriage was a partnership of necessity, but that didn't make it easier. Husbands were expected to provide and protect, wives to serve, obey, and bear children. A 14th century English peasant woman might spend her life in endless cycles of pregnancy, child-rearing, and labor, cooking, spinning, tending animals, and managing the home. Many women bore 10 or more children, but only a handful survived infancy. Marriages were not equal partnerships, but hierarchies. The church preached that husbands were the heads of households, and wives were to obey them as they would obey God. Domestic violence was disturbingly common, and though church courts sometimes intervened, women often had no real escape. A wedding night wasn't always joyful. We cannot ignore one of the harshest truths. For many women, the wedding night was not a celebration, but a command. Consent was rarely considered. The act was about producing heirs, not intimacy. Chroniclers rarely recorded the private pains of these nights, but fragments of poetry, legal records, and even medical writings hint at the silent suffering endured by countless brides. To the outside world, a consummated marriage meant legitimacy. To the bride, it could mean fear, injury, or resignation. The weight of widowhood and remarriage. Marriage didn't always end in lifelong misery. Sometimes it ended in death. Life expectancy was low, and many women outlived their husbands. Widowhood could mean newfound freedom for some, especially if they inherited property. But more often, it meant vulnerability. A widow might be quickly remarried off to another man, often against her will, to secure property or alliances. For example, Joan of Kent, known as the Fair Maid of Kent, was forced into marriages not once but twice, each time caught in webs of political intrigue. Her life shows how widows were rarely left alone. They were assets to be traded, not women to be free. The Church's grip on marriage. The Catholic Church played a powerful role in defining marriage. By the 13th century, it had declared marriage a holy sacrament, binding for life. Divorce was almost impossible. But even the Church's rules were bent by kings and popes. Henry VIII's infamous break from Rome's centuries later was born of the same struggle, the desire to escape an unhappy marriage when the Church refused to grant annulment. This shows how marriage was not just personal, it was political, spiritual, and deeply controlled. Conclusion: not a fairy tale, but a struggle. When we peel back the romanticized layers of medieval marriage, we find a reality that is far from happily ever after. Marriages were arranged for power, not love. Children were forced into unions before they understood them. Wives endured betrayals, burdens, and silence. Husbands, too, were trapped by duty and expectation, their personal desires often irrelevant. And yet, within this grim framework, small moments of tenderness sometimes flickered, letters exchanged, whispered promises, stolen moments of laughter. But these were exceptions, not the rule. The truth is clear. For most, marriage in the Middle Ages was less a union of hearts and more a contract of survival. So the next time we think of fairy tale weddings in castle halls, let us remember the countless unheard voices of the past, reminding us that love, freedom, and equality in marriage are not ancient traditions, but modern triumphs hard-won across centuries. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient scandal, hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and ring the notification bell, so you never miss another story from the strange and shocking side of history.